Hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, still the Bogota edition, but I have good news, Travis. We actually have all the paperwork done and we are flying home on Sunday.
Oh, good. You can finally get back to work.
I can. And there's a lot happening for me to talk about, or for us to talk about. Well, I've been gone. You went and saw a Nissan Leaf. There's an F-150 Lobo, a new absolutely bonkers Corvette. We're going to be talking hybrids, Mavericks, and all that jazz, and maybe a few viewer questions. So let's roll through the intro and see you on the side. So Travis, I suppose we should start with our 5-star reviews because we got another one. And you know what? We are really close to 50 5-star reviews on the Apple Podcasts app, which does not sound like a lot, which is why we need our viewers to really type things into that.
We know you're watching.
Field.
We know you're listening.
We know.
And we appreciate it. But we actually appreciate those 5-star reviews. This one says top-notch resource from Opera Guy 42, simply one of the internet's best resources and guides to automotive design, technology, and engineering. Thoughtful, intelligent, and candid appraisals of the multitude of transportation options available to the majority of consumers today. There are a lot of big words in there, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
I do appreciate it. He did not say anything about our hairstyles, which, you know, mine's a little, let's just say we, friend here whose son is in barber school. Someone, not me, made the mistake of going, sure, you should cut our hair. And I was like, I guess. And then the cutting hap kept going and going and going and going. And I was like, at what point do I just say, just use a number one and just buzz it off? But, you know, hey, we're here.
That way you can match me. I mean, I was getting a little bit long. I had to comb it one morning, and I went, oh, boy, time for a haircut. I am due for a shave here, but I'm hopping on the road early tomorrow morning, so that's probably what I'll do after we're done here.
Off to see some fun things, which we should talk about these fun things that are coming up in the news. So what news stories struck you this week? I was intrigued by Ford doubling down on the Maverick Lobo, which they're calling a street performance truck, with an F-150 Lobo.
Yes, and ironically, I have a Maverick in my driveway, and after driving it, I went, you know what? Some more street performance here would be fantastic. But we have the bigger version. I think they'll probably sell quite a few of them. Is it street performance enough for you?
That's the question. I would go with no, because Ford did not, jam a supercharged V8 in there. And that's when I heard the announcement that they were doing this, and you were a little miffed, I think, that we didn't get invited to go see the F-150 Lobo in person. Maybe it turned out not to be a big deal because it's not exactly a nothing burger, but it's mostly a handling and styling kit. The V8 engine's basically the same one that you get in the regular F-150 V8. I had sort of wondered, hoped, dreamed that maybe they would snag a supercharged V8 from a Mustang.
I mean, the thing is, it's not like they don't have any power already. And especially if it's an unladen pickup, if you throw some different wheels and tires and lower things a little bit, tighten it up, it's going to already make it more fun to drive, right? There is already power there. But yeah, if we're going to jump all the way in, is there a Super Lobo? Is there an extra Lobo edition? Is there a next level that we can look forward to? A Lightning Lobo? I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but how do we get a little bit more?
A light bow?
Sure. I think Lightning Lobo is probably a little bit better than the Light Bow.
A Lobo-ting?
Lobing? Yeah, I don't... yeah,
again, ideas coming off the top of our heads here. Marketing department, call us.
Those are maybe not the best ones we've come up with, but either way, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more out of it. If folks are willing to go Raptor and Raptor R and TRX, then throw us a Lobo bone.
I have been perpetually surprised that it has taken us this long to get a street performance truck in America, because we haven't had one since the old Lightning days and the old SRT-10. And, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum together, and of course with all the truck manufacturers, PR people. Mm-hmm. And there had been this claim, especially from Ram. Ram pushes back, going, well, no one bought our last performance truck. People aren't interested in performance trucks. They're interested in off-road trucks, and off-road trucks or this or that. And they definitely wrap pickup trucks in this rah-rah, off-roady Americana. It's always desert, Baja, etc. That's where they
Yeah.
always show these
Jumping
trucks, or
everything. Yeah.
yeah, or they're on a ranch doing ranch things. And I think to myself, in Texas, there are a shit ton more F-150s in Houston than there are anywhere else in Texas.
Hmm.
And they're not doing ranch things. They're driving from home to the office. Maybe they're towing a boat now and then. Maybe they go to Home Depot. Probably not on average, though.
You want to put the kids'
And
nasty
I've always,
cleats in the bed instead of in the car? Great.
yeah.
Totally.
And I've always thought to myself, not that I'm condoning street racing, not going there at all, right? But I am thinking to myself, a Corvette or a Mustang, you can explore that power, you know, inappropriately at times here and there.
Hmm.
You need to pass someone, you want to get on that freeway on ramp or whatever. There are times everybody's done it, right? Not condoning it, but let's just say it's realistic. That use case is more available to the average truck shopper than an off-road course. This explosion in trucks has not come with an explosion in trailer sales and boat sales and off-road park openings. And the average American actually probably lives closer to a racetrack than a sand dune.
Yeah, I mean, I also would venture to guess that if we see a slight uptick in off-roading, it's once or twice, right? Someone goes, "Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
have the truck that can do the thing. I went and did the thing, and then that was it. They
Mm-hmm.
went, checked the box, and moved on. Hey, my truck can do this. I've totally done it once, and then
Yeah.
it didn't become their life, you know?
And I would, I have to admit, I would do more off-roading if I lived in an area where it was deserty and there was less damage potential for body work.
Yeah,
That's the thing. In my area, a lot of the off-road places are very tight, and you know, pinstriping is probably the least of the worries, but sliding into a tree, sliding into this and that, it's a bummer for a new vehicle to do that because
yeah.
I know I probably would be the guy that ends up doing it accidentally. And if I were to really get into off-roading, I would just use a used vehicle. And most of the off-roading that I've done has been in older vehicles for that reason. My Grand Cherokee is not exactly right because slid
Right.
off a tree once and into another, slid off a log, I should say, and into a tree. And I didn't care because it's 25 years old.
Yeah, you basically got to be able to write them off in your head and go,
Hmm.
this is because if you damage it, then are you fixing it? And then if you fix it, it's
Hmm.
going to get damaged again. I mean, so if it's a real off-roader, and I hate to say it because I know the off-road world doesn't like them, but if you want to go off-road accessibly, go get a side-by-side. Please don't tear up
Yeah.
all the trails with a side-by-side. That's the biggest problem. But just them existing is a vehicle that's
Hmm.
built to get dinged around. Like, you don't mind if you show up to an off-road park with a side-by-side that's got scratches all over it and whatever, but you don't want to take your truck
Hmm.
to work looking like you just came through a war zone. So that's
Yeah.
where the right tool for the job is kind of the deal there. And yeah, there's a street
Side by
outside.
sides are
I
also
don't have an off-road
fantastically
one.
capable.
That's true, and I think they're probably a lot more fun. Let's say you're out of the
Hmm.
dunes. I would rather, as much as the Raptor R is an incredible machine, I'd have more fun in a side by side, just about guaranteed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, Emmy Hall, who you've met on
Mhm.
occasion here and there,
Mhm.
she falls into, I think, more my philosophy when it comes to off-roading. She likes lighter vehicles, smaller vehicles, but she's also a little crazy because she off-roads in a rear-wheel drive Miata.
That's true. Yeah, momentum is key there.
Well, her thing is she likes getting stuck because she likes getting unstuck.
Hmm.
So the
Yeah,
recovery process is fun for her. And
yeah,
I see this and I'm like, okay, great, Emmy, but I think I would prefer a lighter vehicle with four-wheel drive so I just don't get stuck in the first place.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
getcha.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I'm all for a lighter vehicle to begin with. I mean, if I was going to go off roading right now, like if I'm gonna build a little off roader, first of all, how serious do I need it to be? A used Jeep is great, and it'll do everything stock that you probably
Hmm.
want to or need to do. But then the resale value on those is super high, and I go, you know what? Give me something older that has some ground clearance, 4x4, lower range. gearing. I have my first car was a 96 Honda Passport. I'm not pretending
Hmm.
that's a super off-road vehicle, but that would cost you pennies today. Go out, learn your off-roading, figure out what you do or
Yeah.
don't need, and bang up the vehicle, call it a call it
Hmm.
a wash, and then figure out what your next one is.
If you have a two-speed transfer case and at minimum a rear locking differential, you can do an awful lot off-road with any of that format of vehicle. At that point, capability-wise, for most of what especially most consumers think of as off-roading, is more soft roading. If we're going to get really technical and you're going to start, rock crawling, you want to do Moab, then you're going to really want to look at higher ground clearance, shorter wheelbases, maybe a front locker, or you're in the realm of Wrangler, Bronco, limited number of things like that. But honestly, that first step up into two-speed transfer case, locking rear differential, where the front and rear differentials inputs are firmly locked together and you can move even if only one of the rear wheels has traction, that is already going to put you in a very, very good place capability wise. And from that point on, the difference in capability between, say, a similar year and similarly equipped Forerunner or Grand Cherokee or anything along those lines is really just going to be the tires and ground clearance. So have you lifted it? Have you not lifted it? What kind of tires do you have on there? And then the next level of durability is really just, have you replaced the stock bushings and suspension mounts and suspension components with upgraded components? Because there are vehicles that have heavier duty parts and pieces
Right.
for heavy duty off-roading, especially that kind of, dune jumping that we were talking about, where you're really going to be bashing and bottoming out on things. But most people are going to be able to go to a dune park like the ones up in Michigan or the ones in Southern California or Arizona, et cetera, and have a lot of fun relatively safely without worrying about too much body damage in a lot of that format vehicle with very little difference truly between them.
But to the point we were talking about earlier, I'll tell you one thing that that I've experienced with all the vehicles that we drive. The last thing I want to do for a vehicle that I drive every day is put bigger, meatier tires on it. If I'm taking a stock tire, I'm going to swap it out
Yeah.
for something. I'm going to have a hard time putting an off-road tire on there because I know I'm losing miles per
Hmm.
gallon. I'm losing handling on the road, which is where it exists most of the time, and I'm also making for a much, much louder cabin
Yeah.
experience most of the time.
Hmm.
That is hard to over. I mean, obviously, it's not. Oh my god, I can't hear anything, but it's hard to explain to
Yeah.
somebody just how big that difference is. So, give me a street tire,
Yeah.
and
And
that's
don't
if you
forget
want that,
your
that's what you find in the Lobo.
yeah, and don't forget your braking and your acceleration times and distances are also really going to stretch out an awful lot too. Those larger diameter tires mean less mechanical advantage. It means, and then the tire compounds themselves also play a role here when it comes to braking and handling. But that's kind of a big problem with really going that next level of modification yourself aftermarket. That's kind of why I decided not to put KO2s on the Grenadier because I really thought to myself, am I actually going to take this into a situation where I can test its true capability and also worry about its resale value because it still needs to get sold? Maybe once I'm back, from the birth of our daughter, we'll actually start worrying about that part.
I'm not so sure that Grenadier's holding around.
It is handy, and actually, I have to say, it does work really quite well as a family vehicle because the boxiness means that you can put a rear-facing child seat behind someone my height or even a little bit taller,
Mhm.
as long as they're willing to sit very upright up front. You can do it, and all the stuff that we packed for being gone with a baby for 6 weeks, strollers, car seats, you know, all the formula, everything you could possibly imagine that we needed for 6 weeks fit real easy in the back of that Grenadier. We have a friend that's actually volunteered to pick us up from the airport on the return, and I thought to myself, that stuff's not going to fit in your XC60. I think you're going to need to pick us up in one of our cars.
Well, I was just going to say, please don't tell me you left that Grenadier at the airport. I didn't think you would, but you had me
No,
worried there for a
no,
second.
no.
I was like,
It's not there.
and I'll tell you what, I thought about flying down and stealing that for a couple weeks. I went, he's not using it.
Edgar dropped Edgar dropped us off at the airport. he may need to pick us back up in it because there's enough room. But any rate, back on the news of the day, you have a Leaf. Nissan has turned over a new Leaf, shall we say?
And I thought about it, and I was like, oh, we could have put that in the thumbnail, we could have put that in the title, but it's just, I think everyone else was going to jump to it first, and I don't, we don't need to beat the dead horse there. However, I am
Don't
really
we?
excited. No, we don't. I'm really excited about this Leaf. More excited than I thought I would be, but we have talked so much about affordable vehicles. And there's a big issue with affordable EVs in that, by and large, there are not a lot available. And then if they are available, the question is like, what are you sacrificing? And there have been a lot of drop offs from your mainstream, call it a mid $40,000 EV versus a low $30,000 or $35,000 EV, and that's MSRPs, not sale value, but we have to have something to go off of. I'm really excited for this to come out. They are playing the same game that everyone else is playing. So let me just start off by, we do not know pricing. We have heard that a lot. We are going to continue to hear that for at least another month or two as things start to adjust. We do have some news on that, but again, Nissan says we don't know. I'm guessing that it's still going to be in the low 30s to start out with. They've got a bigger battery for the standard battery, which is great. We're up from a 40 kilowatt to a 52. It's a big jump. I looked at the efficiency of the S Plus, which has the same wheel and tire package and a slightly smaller motor, and I'm guessing we're going to be right around, probably just below 200 miles on that one. So not great, but honestly, not bad for your day-to-day driving. So that's going to be a good place to start. But we are going to see some overlap on Aria. I'm calling that right now. That top-end Leaf has some really cool features. So the bigger battery, 75 kilowatt-hour battery, we can get over 300 miles, 303. But the top end gets wider tires, and that is severely hampering that range. Bigger wheels, bigger tires. And but it gets a bunch of cool features. It's got the electrochromatic roof situation that goes in segments, which is really cool. It's not on and
that's
off.
cool.
You can open it up as a sunroof, or you can open it up for
Very
the rear.
Porsche.
Yep. And it's even got the Leaf, the Leaf, not logo, but the Leaf name on it. So if you catch it the right time of day, it'll project it at the car. Kind of fun, cute. They didn't have to do that. It's got 3D tail lights again at that top end trim, which is really neat to look at. We didn't get a chance. And I've seen some comments, and this is not against viewers, but just understand we only get what we get. I said we don't have measurements at this time, but then after we got home, after we left and had filmed everything, we got measurements. So we made another video, put it on our EV Buyer's Guide channel. So we did a deeper dive of, hey, here's a lot more to know about it, but you don't see as much of it in person. So we tried to cover what we could, but anyway, there's a lot of stuff.
And so, what are the dimensions? How big is this little beauty?
It's and I want to say it's about 173 inches, so it's a hair shorter than the outgoing one, which is a little bit strange, but it's a hair wider. But the front end actually makes it seem a lot wider. It's just a big, it's a smile,
big smiley face,
just like an NC Miata. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting NC Miata left and right, but its footprint is not radically different from the outgoing model. I'm disappointed though that we are now at a swoopy sedan crossover thing and not the utility hatchback, but it's a little bit slicker than the outgoing model, so efficiency is up in that regard. But headroom in the back is not enough for me, but should be enough for plenty. I was out there with Sofyan, and shocker, he fit, and I did not. But actually, interestingly enough, we're now finally on a battery electric platform, right? Instead of a modified internal combustion one. And even though that roof line is, I looked at it and went, I won't fit. But there's basically the same amount of room in the back seats of this one as you got in the outgoing one, which is a hatchback. But that speaks to some of the compromises in the packaging, because they had to put that battery somewhere, and a lot of that went under the floor, which raises those rear seats, which means you lose out on total volume. So,
and that battery is finally liquid cooled.
It's liquid cooled. There's a heat pump, and there's a battery heater.
It's modern.
You have to get the top two trims to get the heat pump, but it's still liquid cooled, and that's one of my takeaways. If you live in a cold climate, you can now look at a Nissan Leaf. It's an option.
Yep. It's no BYD Seagull.
No,
it's not going to be a BYD Seagull when it comes to pricing. No $14,000 EVs here, but I'm hoping that Nissan can pull a finger out and make this as affordable as we expect the Bolt to be, because Equinox is a really good deal.
Well, and I'm curious about that Bolt. Like, how are you going to make a Bolt cheaper than an Equinox and make it still
Yeah.
worthwhile? For example, I was in the tracks a couple weeks ago. I had it here at home, and I went. The good news is this doesn't. I know this is inexpensive, but it doesn't feel cheap, cheap. And actually, the Ford Maverick
Hmm.
interior feels cheaper than the Chevy Trax, but it does it in a cute and quirky way. So you're not mad
Yeah.
about it. You just go, yeah, this is very plasticky. But the Equinox is a nice interior, but how much less are you going to put into something like a Bolt to make it competitive? And Nissan says that Leaf will still be uh, very competitive as an affordable model. Again, whatever that means, but I'm anticipating
Yeah.
low 30s.
Yeah, and is it going to qualify for the federal tax credit? I mean, assuming that credit exists by the time it sells.
I don't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Yeah, my memory is my assumption is no, but I could be surprised. And that I think is the problem with Equinox EV because Equinox EV staff starts at 33,495 with destination right now, and most of the deals that are going on. But you get the $7,500 tax credit right off the top on that thing. That makes it a $25,000, approximately EV.
Yeah,
That's really hard to compete with for Nissan, unfortunately for them.
it is, but the Leaf is a lot cuter.
Yep.
Just throwing it out there.
Let's
It
move
is
on to
no
hybrid
more bold
news.
and fun.
That's true. Let's
Yep.
move on to hybrid news because for 2026, we are getting a new hybrid Corvette.
Yes, more hybrid Corvettes. I mean, it's
Hmm.
the hybrid takeover at this point. ZR1X is the nomenclature there, right?
It is. And it's basically E-Ray with a much more powerful engine. So over 1,200 horsepower. They're calling it America's supercar. And it honestly is. If you had told me, I don't know, 10 years ago that the Corvette would be reborn into this mid-engine thing that is honestly taking the fight to, well, actually, I would argue beyond Ferrari, Lamborghini, etc., I would
Yeah.
have told you were insane. But that is the weird world that we live in. We now have the Stingray, the E-Ray, the Z06, the ZR1, and this X, and it's crazy.
Yeah, that is. We are well into the too much horsepower situation, especially
Too
with how light
much,
those
really?
vehicles are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You heard it here. That's where I'm at. That is so much
This
power,
is
and the power to weight ratio is insane. Um, and what they didn't do here, just like they didn't do with the E-Ray, is make it a plug-in, which I think they
no.
should because it's
We'll
got a
talk
pretty
about that in a
large
bit.
battery on there comparatively. But anyway, um, at least they're
A
doing it right. You
thousand.
have the technology; it's sitting right here. It's in the E-Ray. Why not bring it over? Get
Mm-hmm.
yourself max performance, and that's what the E-Ray did. Right for a while, it was the highest
Yeah.
performance Corvette out there, and and,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's all-wheel drive. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting,
Mm-hmm.
interesting way to do things.
1,250 horsepower for people that haven't heard here. The LT7 twin turbo V8 is going to scream all the way up to 7,000 RPM and produce 1,064 horsepower. So, sort of
Mhm.
take that, demons. 828 pound-feet of torque. The front motor, 186 horsepower added to the pie, to mix my metaphors here a little bit, for
Sure.
electrified all-wheel drive. 0 to 60 under 2 seconds is what they're claiming. We're talking sport bike territory here
Yeah, and
practically.
and again, I think I talked about that power to weight ratio thing. Like in owner's hands, it's dangerous. Anything under two and a
Hmm.
half, dangerous because now we're talking about reaction time. Now we're talking about, you don't understand how quick things are happening when you're launching at that speed, and you have to make sure your eyes come back.
Quarter mile in under 9 seconds, trap speed of over 150 miles an hour, they're saying. This thing is absolutely bonkers nuts. So they've fiddled with pretty much everything they say. It retains the same shape and size of the E-Ray front drive unit, but it has different internal components, has extra power, extra torque, and it can apply all the way through 160 miles an hour before disconnecting now. So it actually helps out that entire quarter mile
Yeah,
run
that's quite a way.
is with the motor helping, which is absolutely bonkers. The question, obviously, some people might have, and we'll get to this other part in a bit, is how much is it going to cost? I'm going to guess at least $250,000. because the ZR1's already 173.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Right around 250. If they want to come in on a budget, 249.99. But it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be
So
weirdly inexpensive. You look at what it
yeah.
is, what it can do. My only downside is when you look at this as like a whole package, it's still going to have a Corvette interior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's the part I was going to get to, because the base Corvette is a fantastic buy. $68,300 for a mid-engine supercar, and I would call it a supercar already
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Stingray format, because it's already bonkers. And unlike any Corvette that came before with the mid-engine design, I don't know who was smoking crack at GM that said this is a good idea, but whoever it is, they probably deserve a promotion and maybe more crack. I don't know, because it is a fantastic car. But there is that one question. It's like, it's more Lamborghini, Ferrari, than practically McLaren, et cetera, than a
McLaren.
lot of other things out there. With a price tag, I mean, you could buy 5 Stingrays for the price of a McLaren. Heck, you could buy a Z06 and an E-Ray and a Stingray all for the price of some of the McLaren models. And I would argue
Mhm.
you'd have more fun because you'd be able to drive it every day and you wouldn't be so worried about it all the time. I don't
Right.
recommend anybody destroy a $70,000 car, but if you've got McLaren money and you buy a Stingray and you bump it into a parking garage wall or a
I'm not
a
worried
speed
about
bump or something, yeah, boohoo, toss a new bumper on. It's going to be a lot cheaper to fix.
it. Yeah, I mean, and you can, especially even with that money, you can do so many different things. This is not going to be somebody's daily driver, like we know that. But again, Corvettes have often not been daily drivers, but it's because it's been this podium vehicle for people, for your
Hmm.
everyday person, right? They're like, I can finally afford my Corvette, and it's always,
Hmm.
comparatively brought performance and excitement and lighter weight and just access that the everyman doesn't get, but they
Hmm.
can now in a Corvette. You want a high performance Dodge? It was a Viper. Viper is not a Corvette.
Yeah.
It's so far above and beyond, and insurances and that whole thing. So this has
Yeah.
always not been the daily driver, but that one's for sure reaching a different
Right.
echelon of owner who probably hasn't really cared about Corvettes to this point. It's
Yeah.
just it
It's
hasn't been
like
on the radar.
not the daily driver, but I would say the weekendly driver. And that is, I think, one of
No,
the differences we see in the owners of Corvettes versus McLarens. Just to use McLaren as an example, this goes for all the
yeah,
exotics. McLaren owners have a bunch of different cars. They've got a huge portfolio of supercars. I can't remember the exact number here, but the McLaren PR person, I think, said that the average McLaren owner owns at least 10 other cars, most of them very, very expensive, and like
right.
Bentleys and Rolls and things like that. So it's not an every weekend. You're not driving your McLaren every weekend, which is why they come with a battery tender and a cover and all that jazz.
Mhm.
A Corvette is the car that's likely to be driven every weekend because, especially the base models, they are being purchased by people that maybe they've made life choices. Maybe they're like, you know what? Instead of both of us driving a 3 Series and an X3, maybe we have a Honda Civic and we have a Corvette
Mhm.
because that is something you could do for about the same price.
Yeah, and that's a trade off I'd make every day of the week.
Hmm.
But but it's exciting. I mean, it's great to see this push forward. I don't worry about it, but I don't want us to be in a world where we are only building commuter cars. I want cars to still be
Hmm.
fun and exciting and draw you in. And Chevy's not going to sell a bunch of these. That's not the point.
Hmm.
They might not make any money on this, but they're bringing something forward. I had a weird snapshot in my Facebook timeline that said, "Hey, here's your memory from wherever ago, right?" And it was I want to think it was called like the code 140R, and it was an old concept that was based off the Camaro aesthetically, but it was a small coupe that was meant to be your Chevy Trax. Right, these days it was a rear
Hmm.
wheel drive 1.4 liter turbo, and what I said is like, that's awesome. I want that to be my first car. That's where some of this Corvette stuff comes from. It starts working its way. By the way, I'm disappointed they didn't make it because it would have been fun. A rear wheel drive Chevy Sonic, basically.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
that's where this stuff rolls down from, and that was so cool because it looked like a Camaro. And let's see some of that Corvette roll down. And I don't think the answer is the Corvette SUV or the Corvette sub brand, But gosh, if they make many more versions, that might be what we see coming next.
I always wanted big cars. I always wanted a Fleetwood or my first new car was a Chrysler LHS. So, huge, way over 205. It was over 207 inches long, actually, now that I think about it. People are like, oh, the Dodge Charger is so big. And I've looked it up and I'm like, oh my God, that Chrysler in 2000 was even bigger. But that's a whole different story. It is interesting that we are seeing the rise of hybrids in different formats. And I'm kind of hoping maybe that hybrid is no longer going to be a bad word because we have, the video we posted last week of the Honda Civic Hybrid. If you guys haven't watched that, be sure and go ahead and check that out. The Civic Hybrid is truly a no compromises hybrid, in my opinion. It does not, in most people's driving, does not achieve EPA fuel economy estimates because most people drive pretty high speeds out on the open highway. And in America, there's a lot of interstate. If you're doing a lot of city driving, it's going to be very good. If you are pretty cautious driving, keep it to 60, 65. You're going to get great fuel economy. I don't care because it still gets better fuel economy than the regular Civic, quicker 0 to 60 than a Civic Si, and with comparable tires to a Civic Si would handle almost as well. And I think that's kind of why we're starting to see more hybrids and more acceptance of hybrids, as well as manufacturers going hybrid only like Toyota, better performance, better fuel economy than their base model. But also this performance hybrid, where we have not just AMG and BMW and other manufacturers going for electric motors to add extra torque, but now the legendary Corvette with an electric motor, and GM being really upfront and saying this level of performance would not be possible without an electric motor in that vehicle.
Right, and I think the other cool thing that it provides, obviously we're not talking about like off or and like inclement weather capability, right? That's not what this all-wheel drive system is for. But if you did anything else with that drivetrain, now you have to make it. It's a more complex all-wheel drive system, and I don't think you get the
Mm-hmm.
returns, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, another motor is not light, and batteries aren't terribly light, but it's the way that it interacts with that system that really gives you that extra punch. Ironically, this layout is basically what you found in the BMW i8. Obviously, turned way
Mm-hmm.
way up, but you look at that, and that
Yep.
is good. We're not quite a decade ago, but that's a long time ago. And this like Halo car going, oh my gosh, what is this? How does that work? And now we're
Yeah.
seeing that in a Corvette. It's awesome. Although that Corvette's gonna be a lot more expensive than that i8 is, but and I guess an E-Ray would have
Yeah.
been
Well, I mean,
cheaper.
if you're, yeah. At its time, the i8 was pretty pricey. I'm pretty sure if the i8
Yeah,
existed today, it would be way up there in the Corvette pricing strata.
yeah,
I really loved the i8, but I will admit that a lot of the detractors at the time were correct in some ways, primarily with the level of power. I think there was a big
mm,
disappointment in the i8's oomph level,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that did surprise me because they could and should have bumped the power level up quite a bit further, I think, with that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that? I mean, obviously, there's a reliability concern. So, like, the size of engine they put in there was not one that was going to crank tons of power reliably. But they could have gone with the bigger engine.
Hmm.
But then you talk about different compromises and adding weight, and
Yeah.
but a lot of that was carbon fiber and plastic. So just trying to keep efficiency up
Hmm.
and weight down. I guess that's probably where that ended up. But
It probably would not have been a significant change in weight because a 2-liter four-cylinder should be able to deliver in a reliably warrantable vehicle over 300 horsepower. Mercedes is doing well over 300 horsepower out of a 2-liter four-cylinder turbo. BMW hacked a cylinder off because they used the 3-cylinder format of the engine that was shared with Mini at the time. And so it was that 1.5 liter turbo 3-cylinder. The electric motor in it was 131 horsepower. I would have argued if they had tried for 500 horsepower total, that could have been all kinds of fantastic. If they'd bumped the motor up to 200, maybe bumped the engine to 300, I think that would have been more interesting. And that's kind of what we're seeing happening now with some of the hybrid and plug-in hybrid supercars out there. They're finally going that direction with these crazy numbers. The McLaren plug-in hybrids, the other plug-in hybrids from other supercar manufacturers out there, and of course now from GM, only without the plug, which I think
right,
is actually maybe marketing-wise the right way to go with the Corvette, And that
Yeah.
leads us on to one of our other questions that viewers had, which is why don't hybrids have bigger batteries?
Well, I mean, the good news, and understandably, right? Like, I'll roll my eyes a little bit, but the marketing on the Corvette is one that is meant to be more traditional, and plugging in is
Mm-hmm.
not traditional. Like, we know there go people who are buying that aren't going, "Oh, cool, it's electrified." They're going, "This is fast as hell." That's why I'm getting this Corvette.
Yep.
So we don't want to plug it
Mm-hmm.
in. We don't want to worry. They're not going to run it in EV mode. That's the creep
Mm-hmm.
it out of the garage so you don't piss off the neighborhood in the with the HOA or whatever. And that's the last time you will ever consider clicking the EV mode button, which is why
Yeah.
they don't build it for folks like me who would go, "Ooh, how far
Right.
can I go?" But it doesn't need to be bigger in that application. The question though is your everyday hybrid, and I think we start talking about packaging a lot, and we talk about
Mm-hmm.
affordability, and that just the understanding that a lot of these vehicles are built to a line. Of course, it could exceed that, right? So we need fuel economy
Mm-hmm.
numbers, we need power numbers, we need to meet specific EPA standards. Sure, they could do it bigger, better, different, smaller, however you want to put it, but costs money, and they don't have to right now. I'm sure they're already working on it, and they've,
Exactly.
they've done the math,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it comes down to
It
math.
really is that balancing line. I remember talking to a powertrain engineer not that long ago, and the general consensus seems to be that for most hybrid format vehicles, for about a mid-sized sedan, compact sedan-ish, somewhere around 1 kilowatt hour is about the most that makes sense cost-wise and efficacy-wise in this format of vehicle. And you'll notice that the bigger hybrids, the 2-row, 3-row SUV hybrids, have slightly bigger batteries, up to maybe about 1.6, 1.7 kilowatt hours, just because they have extra mass. But
Yeah.
the main reason I was given was that the vast majority of Americans do not live in hilly or mountainous areas.
Hmm.
So the average shopper that's out there buying, when you look at that, it does make
Yeah.
sense. If you're in Los Angeles, New York, Houston, any of the big mega cities or big metropolitan areas in the U.S., Texas has two of them, of course, or three or four of them, depending on how you want to count: Austin, Dallas, Houston, etc.
Hmm.
They're pretty flat. And the Bay Area in San Francisco, Northern California, we've got 9 million people here. Most people don't really go up into the hills, even though we are surrounded by them. Similar actually for Seattle. We're surrounded by mountains up there, but most people are just driving in town. And
Yeah.
those longer extended downhill grades are the main reason you might want a bigger battery pack, because you're going to be able to regenerate more electricity and stuff it in the battery. The downside would be when you're not going down a hill, you're carrying this extra weight around, and of course you had to pay for the battery in the first place.
Right. And then when they're going through these testing procedures, the manufacturer knows exactly how to make the most of that city loop. And if they don't need to make
Mm-hmm.
the battery any bigger to achieve the number that they need, then why would you? And because I want you
Mm-hmm.
to is unfortunately not a good enough answer, because I could,
Right.
God, if I went crazy, I could buy one car every couple of years. And that's just not enough to move the market. I will say
And
the
there
one
is
thing
this
in the hybrid. Oh, go ahead.
I would say there is this green interested person, and I hate to make this sound bad, but there is this segment of the green shopper populace that says that doesn't listen to logic. So I've had this conversation a million times, even with other journalists that are a little tilted, let's just say, in their perspectives compared to mine, or I would say they are, whatever. It's the whole, like, why can't this hybrid be in EV mode longer? Like, I want my hybrid to be in EV mode till 80 miles an hour. And my question's always been, why does it matter to you whether you're in EV mode at that speed or not? Because all the energy came from the gasoline. So for me, efficiency numbers trump EV mode anythings. I don't need an EV mode button. I don't I don't care about the top speed in EV mode. All I care about is that fuel economy number when it comes to an efficiency focused hybrid like a
Hmm.
Prius or a Kia Niro EV or a Hyundai Elantra EV. These
The
EV groups
Camry,
that are right, really focused on that big efficiency number. If it's a performance EV or a luxury EV, sure, stick some buttons on there, play with the modes. we're not talking about EVs with huge fuel efficiency numbers like some of the Volvo and Mercedes and BMW plug-in hybrids, et cetera, under 30 miles per gallon, whatever. But those efficiency focused hybrids, a lot of people will focus for some reason on this, oh, I want it to stay in EV mode. Why? It's that electricity came from gasoline. What does it matter?
Right. If it came from the wall, that makes a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? If you're
Yeah.
really trying to limit
Mm-hmm.
your gasoline consumption, then it better be coming from somewhere
Mm-hmm.
other than gas. And obviously, the big conversation about
Right.
where that power comes from. But the point is, you put it into the vehicle to begin with. Yeah, you want to get the most out of it. Unless
Mm-hmm.
it's the one off where you're like, oh man, it's quieter. Like, yeah, that's usually how that works.
Yeah.
EVs don't really make a whole lot of noise unless they're legally mandated to. So yeah, I see what you're saying, and we've had the same conversation with the plug-in, which is if you want your plug-in to stay in EV mode longer, then don't get a plug-in, get an EV.
Get an EV. Yep. And
Yeah,
I am a little bit more accepting of plug-in hybrids that turn their engines on a little bit sooner than some people would like, depending on the format, because it's all about mitigation and harm reduction at that point. So I am not overly offended at the Hyundai Kia plug-in hybrids that turn on the engine to heat the cabin, because you're still mitigating your energy consumption from gasoline by having the electric drivetrain on board. And there, I think it really just becomes more of a personal decision and commute style and distance equation.
yeah,
Because if your commute is, say, 50 miles every day, which is not abnormal for an American to drive 50 miles a day, then most plug-in hybrids, the new RAV4 plug-in apparently accepted, they're going to turn the gasoline engine on at some point.
yeah. It's
So
coming on
it
anyway.
doesn't, yeah, so it doesn't bother me if the engine comes on in the morning when it's frosty outside and we use gasoline to get up the hill. And then at some point, it decides that the resistance heater is enough to keep heating the cabin. But I've also climbed the hill and done some driving on gasoline. It's not like it's just burning gasoline for no reason, right? It's doing something for you, it's moving you down the road. I'm okay with that if I can then do the return trip on electricity. And at that point, if you compared hybrid A to hybrid B, you've used the same amount of gasoline or perhaps even less. It's just where did you use it and why?
Right, and that's and I'm with you there. Right, it's the big picture. And for me, I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks, and so like I've got a friend that's got the Sportage plug-in, and that one annoys me that it turns on the engine to heat, and because that commute is really small. So I know that particular use
Mm-hmm.
case it wasn't necessary to turn on the engine, but obviously the engine is a really
Yeah.
inefficient way to run a heater. Yeah, it's a lot of energy being
Yeah.
used to just create heat. And so, but I hear what you're saying. On my end, I was one of the reasons I did not keep my Audi A3 e-tron longer is because my trip to and from town, I live in a small town, so the next town over. On my way back, coming up the hill, we're talking a half mile from my house. It kicked the engine on every time, no matter how careful I was.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, I liked playing the game. How can I get there? Can I get there? It kicked it on, and I went, well, that's really annoying because at that point the engine's not even going to heat up, and if it's going to run, I'd rather it heat up and the whole thing. So that one came just a hair short for my particular use case.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was another reason I got rid of it. So it's not just that one thing, but it's all these applications, and the manufacturers have to pick one to cover. What I was going to say earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board with hybridization as long as it makes sense and works well and better. And I just look at it as the electric version of a turbocharger, as far as like how do we increase the performance of these gasoline
Mm-hmm.
engines with probably an efficiency boost as well. And by the way, performance is also efficiency. There's just two different ways to look at that. The one thing that's
Yeah.
missing that I'm so sad it didn't take off. And Alex, I'll be honest, this is slide aside. I've been on this kick about, oh man, all these cars that I love that I really wish I'd own. One of them is a Honda CRZ, and the
Mm-hmm.
CRZ came with a supercharger. And
It
I
did.
looked at this when I bought my Scion FRS. I went, I am so intrigued. And you and I have had some conversations about vehicles I'm very intrigued by, and I get really intrigued by them. I wanted to go look at one of these supercharged CRZs, couldn't hardly find them. And then my big question was, because this is my daily commuter and I did a lot of miles back then, I said, I want to know what the miles per gallon are. But obviously, there is no EPA test for a supercharged CRZ, and I could never get the answer. So I let it go by the wayside. And if you have a supercharged CRZ that you are wanting to give away for a test drive or, up for sale, hit us up at hey@autobuyersguide.com and say, this is for Travis.
And Travis will fly to wherever you are because he is that kind of person.
You know what? There are some weeks that I go, you know what I could do while I'm out and about? Might as well stop and take a look at this thing. But the other thing the CRZ had was a manual transmission. And that's what we're missing. Hybrids can seem to do everything these days, except for, I guess, engine braking when you're towing. So I give them that. But manual transmission. And that was one of the few. The Honda Insight had it as well. So Honda really wanted to make this stick. And that's the biggest thing missing in my mind on the upcoming Prelude is that it's not going to be a manual transmission. I would love to see it come back.
Oh, got to admit, I never liked Honda's manual hybrids. I did not like them at all, Sam. Just could not do it.
I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm just saying, we could have worked on some of that technology and still had it available for me.
That generation IMA I was never a fan of. I mean, it was like Honda had a shoestring budget. Toyota did the Prius. Honda was like, we need a hybrid too. I know, guys, that Insight came out earlier, but at any rate, there was not a well thought out concept where the engine kept spinning when the electric motor was going. Yes, they closed the valves and they tried to do the air spring thing to reduce loss, but still wasn't as efficient. It was kind of slow. Also, just kind of a funky, clunky design, to be honest, to not just detach the engine from the drivetrain. They fixed that, obviously. Yeah. They fixed that in their later hybrids. Their later hybrids way better than IMA.
Yes, that's true. But again, you got to start somewhere. And what's the next generation look like? I don't know.
Yeah.
Challenge.
That is interesting because we are going to be seeing a larger vehicle hybrid from Honda soon.
Well,
we don't know what it will be, though.
There's so much fun stuff coming down the pipeline. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. We should talk about hybrids and how they save energy, though. Just real quickly, let me get on my soapbox here, so pardon me. Because I do think there are a lot of misconceptions around hybridization in vehicles. Simply adding a hybrid system to a vehicle and doing nothing else does not necessarily improve your fuel economy that much. And this is a question we get frequently. Why don't they just do X? Why doesn't Honda stick a hybrid system in this? Why doesn't Toyota stick a hybrid system in that? Or insert any other brand here. And the general answer is hybridization alone does not always improve fuel economy as much as people might think. Good examples, for instance, would be like a Volvo XC90. Yes, the hybrid, the T8 hybrid, gets better fuel economy than the T6 non-hybrid, but there are a few more reasons for that. We do get slight aero differences in the plug-in hybrid XC90 to get the 27 miles per gallon approximately. And we also get the ability to run on the Atkinson cycle in some hybrids, so you can actually run a different combustion cycle to improve efficiency. Often lower rolling resistance tires are used, etc. Specifically in the Volvo, the auto start-stop system being expanded, that ability to be expanded, the air conditioning system being electric has a role in there, and the lack of mechanical all-wheel drive system is a factor also. And when you look at that, that's why it's not a very big leap from one to the other, because Volvo is not changing as much as you'd see changed, for instance, in Corolla to Prius. And that's why, of course, a Corolla hybrid doesn't get the fuel economy that we get in the Prius. It doesn't get all the latest fuel-saving tech from aerodynamics, from different wheels and tire choices, etc., and that whole suite of changes. So simply adding a hybrid system to an F-150, you can see the impact on fuel economy. It's not huge. Simply adding a hybrid to Land Cruiser, Sequoia, Tundra, etc., ditto there, because in those vehicles, that's basically what Toyota did. They just sort of added a battery and electric motor, and they didn't change a whole lot else. The mission of those hybrids is a little bit different. So there's kind of a lot of different tiers here in the hybridization game.
Right. I had the Forester hybrid with me last week. And by the way, love that thing. But if you have to look at your use case.
Are you disappointed about the lack of spare?
Well, we'll get there. Okay. Give me a minute. No, the thing is that if you do a ton of driving, my immediate assumption is that a lot of that includes highway. And if you do a ton of highway driving, you don't necessarily need to get the Forester hybrid because it doesn't really get
Yeah.
any increase on the highway because that's not what it's there for. It's a little bit heavier, but it's the regenerative capacity, it's the getting off the line. That's where you really benefit from the hybrid system, and that's in most hybrid systems, right? That's why in most cases we see a bigger city mile, or I guess a higher city MPG than we do a highway, because that's how that
Hmm.
system is built versus the other way around. So around town, yeah, absolutely. You would end up saving a ton of money over time if you just did your loops around town, which I think a lot of folks are. But like you mentioned, the engine, it's the same 2.5 liter engine, but it's not same.
Hmm.
It's tuned down. So I think instead of 170 or 180 horsepower, it's down to 150 something. The rest of the performance is
Hmm.
boosted up by that electric motor. The one thing though, Subaru won't tell you how much the torque is. They'll tell you how much each one of them puts out, but they didn't tell me. Wouldn't tell you the total output. Oh, I'll survive, but
Yeah, and
it's one of those weird things.
that's a math problem with
Yeah.
a planetary power split style hybrid system like we find in Maverick, in Nautilus, the Toyota Classic hybrid systems, because they've gone off and done something different now with the hybrid Maxes, the
Mhm.
Subaru planetary split system, the Chrysler one in the Pacifica, the classic Chevy Volt, and a few others around the world. And the reason for that is, in theory, the maximum torque output is probably what the drive motor connected to the wheels is good for. In classic Toyota parlance, that would be MG2. That has typically been the peak torque number that manufacturers with that same style hybrid system have used. But when can it be achieved and how often does it happen? There's some questions around that because
Right.
the engine can never, in this style hybrid system, the engine can never purely drive the vehicle mechanically down the road. The way that this functions is that there's a mechanical power path and an electrical power path, and Toyota has been doing as much work as possible to minimize the amount of energy that goes through that electrical path because it's less efficient. So they're trying to minimize that serial hybrid mode, where MG1 would be generating power, sending it to MG2. For this style transmission, that electrical path is required to control the ratio, the physical ratio between the engine and the wheels. And
Mhm.
about 20% of the engine power and torque, generally speaking, flows through that electrical path. 80% flows mechanically through the planetary gear set system there. And so that's why the math is kind of funky on the total torque numbers.
Which does answer a question that we got from a viewer a week or so ago about whether or not Subaru is using the planetary system like Toyota is. And the answer to that one is yes. So thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
And different pros and cons. And actually, that Subaru Toyota split's doing is that Subaru is not getting the same miles per gallon in their Forester hybrid that you get in a Rav4 hybrid, but they're using a completely different powertrain layout because everything's is
Yes.
connected mechanically rather than that disconnect there. Which
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't think
Yeah.
Subaru owners are going to mind in the slightest because they were probably going to go buy another Subaru and they're just happy there's one that gets more miles per gallon. Am I really bummed about not having
Mm-hmm.
that spare tire though? Probably not, if I'm real honest with you. However, I'd be more concerned about
I
it if I
am.
had the sport hybrid, which is what I did, and has those 19-inch wheels. A little more sidewall always makes me feel a bit more comfortable.
Mm.
But I'll admit, and I probably said it before, we'll end up saying it again because we don't know if everyone listens to every episode. We'd love it if you did, but I've never had a flat tire situation. I've never needed the spare
You've
tire that
never had
is
a flat
in the
tire?
vehicle. Nope. Well, hold on,
Never
hold
had
on.
a flat tire.
I'm going to backtrack on that one. I have had it once, and I was able to
Okay.
drive it to the. Yeah, sorry, that's my bad.
Huh.
I was able to drive it over to the tire shop that was down the street. That was a giant pothole situation in Seattle. If you know, you know. And I was able to make that work. So I didn't actually need the spare tire,
Huh.
but that Ford C-Max did not have one. But I also have AAA, and I'm not saying that when you need it is when you won't have access to it, and that means you're out somewhere, you lost reception, you're on that jaggedy
Mm.
road. That's where everything happens, and AAA is not going to come help me there. But okay, I guess in
Hmm.
my
I have
well, a couple years of
I have
driving, I
used
just
the
I just
spare
haven't had to have
tire.
it very much.
Huh. I've used the spare tire in every vehicle I've owned except the Grenadier. It's the only one that has not spared yet.
Okay, owned,
Uh,
not the channel has owned, right?
um, that every vehicle that has had a spare we've used. Oddly enough,
Okay.
fortunately, the EVs that the company has owned have not had flat tires, which
Okay.
did freak me out a little bit because, pretty much everything else that we've had that has had a spare tire, it has been used. The big thing for me, though, is that it's a Subaru. I would not mind, honestly, as much if Honda obviously has no spare in the CRV hybrid. I wouldn't mind as much if Toyota ditched the spare in the RAV4 or made it an option. It's still there, by the way, in case anybody's asking. But Subaru being the off-roady, outdoorsy adventure, go off the beaten path, go where your cell phone doesn't work brand,
Yeah.
that I think is a problem for me. And the reason I'm disappointed is because when you pull up the floorboards in the Forester hybrid, you can see that they could have at least included a donut in there if they had repackaged the battery
It,
better and got
well, it
to
would have been significant
explain that.
repackaging for whatever that's
I don't
worth.
think it I don't think it would be significant repackaging. I think it would be fairly minor, but it would mean less part sharing with Toyota. So we've got to back up to that question that the viewer had. The Subaru hybrid system uses the Subaru Boxer engine, a transmission case very similar to their CVT transmission case with the same bolt pattern, etc. The exact same mechanical all-wheel drive system, clutch units, etc. to send power around as the regular Subaru system. Inside the transmission case, they borrow motors and the planetary gear set from Toyota, and then they rotate them 90 degrees around. So all the Toyota hybrids using that planetary hybrid system are transverse. Yes, we're discounting the rear-wheel drive Lexus ones for the moment. They're all transverse. They take the motors from what appears to be the system in the Highlander, and then they rotate them 90 degrees, stuff them in the transmission case, and then have the mechanical all-wheel drive system. So high parts commonality with Toyota reduces cost. The motors are direct parts, as apparently is the gear set. And then some of the other ancillary stuff to make the gear sets connect the way they want to, that's obviously unique to Subaru, but the core part is common. Then the control systems, the blended braking systems, the batteries, that's all common with Toyota as well. That's where I think Subaru gets into a tiny bit of trouble is they could have designed their own battery pack to work with this system and have been like a liquid cooled pancake sized battery that fit in the bottom of the spare tire well rather than occupying that entire portion of the rear. Because when you lift up the back of the Forester hybrid, you'll notice that the battery's kind of sitting on top of all that whole cargo area. And then under it is almost a completely usable spare tire storage well that is simply not accessible because the battery is pancaked on top. So I think a rearranging of that would have worked better. If it had also used a smaller liquid-cooled lithium-ion pack that was more, slim suitcase size, they probably could have stuck it under a seat somewhere or just on the side of a cargo area, which would have been less obvious, something like that as well. But
So
they chose the less expensive parts common route.
there's an easy way to make that happen, right, Alex?
But
Buy lots of Subaru Forester hybrids and tell them
mhm.
this is what we want, or we won't do it again, and then you'll probably see it happen.
We'll see. Or just have a little bit of shame with a lot of Subaru hybrids with flat tires out there on their favorite trail.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's a way around this. We have a high load capacity on the roof. You could pop a spare tire in your roof rack
If
because
you're going camping,
Subarus,
throw it up there.
yeah,
You just
I'd, I'd,
know
I'd
your
add a spare.
situation, and yeah.
Yeah. And it's not an EV. It's not a Solterra or the upcoming other Subaru. What did they call their wagon?
You were talking about
Trail
the Trail
Seeker?
Seeker.
Trail something?
Mm-hmm.
Trail Seeker. It's not a Trail Seeker,
Trail
etc.,
Seeker.
where range is definitely going to be limited and it's going to be worse if you add things on top of the vehicle. But it's going to be acceptable because you can just stop at a gas station.
Right, and if you're going on a road trip, then you shouldn't be or you're going camping, then making sure you can go to and from your camping site is more important than losing a few miles per gallon on the
Mm-hmm.
way to and from said camping site. So, but we mentioned this earlier. I swapped out, and I admit I was going to put this on our Facebook page, and we had a bit of a time issue when it came to swapping the vehicles, so I couldn't be home. I was going to post. I'm going from all-wheel drive utility hybrid from all-wheel drive to all-wheel drive utility hybrid, and it was going from the Super Forester hybrid to the Maverick all-wheel drive hybrid. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of weird crossover there, but I really am enjoying my time with the Maverick so far.
The Maverick is such a great little truck, and I am astounded that we don't see more of this particular vehicle format in America, because this is something Toyota could have done. And instead we got the Tacoma hybrid, which, is fine if that's what you're into, but it's just not a high mile per gallon truck, right?
No, no.
And I am a little sad that they didn't grab the hybrid system that Toyota uses internationally in some Lexus models, rear wheel drive, and that could have just grabbed that one and jammed it under the hood of the Tacoma and had a 30 mile per gallon Tacoma. How cool would that have been?
I mean, not a bad thing. So I'll admit, and for folks who have followed along, sorry, I think I have another car arriving here soon, so I'm just checking to make sure I'm not missing something. Um, okay. The thing that this makes me miss is the Subaru Baja. Like, give me that all-wheel drive
Mm,
Baja back, because I love the Subaru styling. I wouldn't mind an updated from the interior on the Forester there. They've still got that older infotainment screen. But if there's a world where we can bring those things back, that's one that you could joint develop with Toyota, right? We know there's a lot of parts sharing
yeah,
that happens between them. So Toyota,
they've
pick your
got a
name.
hybrid system now.
Make it a taco, not a Tacoma. Sell a taco and a
Yep.
Tacoma. That would be fun. I'm on board for that. And then you have a Baja, and then you have a Baja taco situation.
And they now have factories they could use in America to build them and avoid the import duties, which is what killed the Baja in the first place. So no longer
Yep.
a concern.
But I will tell you, so here's the little behind the scenes, because these videos will come out hopefully soon. We've had a lot of videos in the queue, so try not to burn out our editor. Thank you, Alexandra. But
Yes.
the Forester hybrid on my test loop got 36 miles per gallon, so very good, a little bit better than it was rated for. And that's happened a lot on this test loop, so I need to check and see if my test loop is real world accurate. Just trying to get you data that's helpful. The Maverick got 41 miles per gallon. I mean, incredible,
Yeah. The
incredible.
Maverick's really efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, and it
That
said,
planetary power split style system's great.
and it tells you, this one tracks how many miles it was in EV mode, which is essentially engine off, right? And it was basically half of the
Hmm.
miles until I got to the highway. So I start on mostly a city loop, and then I go out to the highway. Pretty much half of it was engine off, and I was like, man, this is cued for efficiency for sure.
Yep. The bottom line I think that we should end with is if you're out there car shopping and there's a hybrid option in the segment you're looking in, don't be afraid. Most hybrids out there are doing pretty well these days, even on the
Mhm.
long-term dependability and usability numbers out there. Some of those hybrids, yes, they have scored a little bit lower than the average model, but I think the general consensus is going up. And especially the style hybrid systems that we find in the Honda vehicles that are hybrids, the Toyotas, the Fords, etc. The design of those systems is relatively simple, so long-term dependability has been very, very good. Especially if you take a look at those old Ford Escape hybrids, they're still trucking along. Some
Yep.
are on their third or fourth used battery. And don't be afraid of those battery replacements. I know a lot of people put a lot into that. We have a friend actually who's here staying with us. They bought a Ford Escape hybrid back, the first generation one. First year it was made, first generation one. They've got over 200,000 miles on it. They just
Dang.
replaced the battery. It was $1,100 to get someone out, had the battery that was reconditioned, popped a
Yeah.
reconditioned battery out, connected it up, worked right away. $1,000 back on the road. And when you look at that and you look at how much fuel has been saved over that time period, how many brakes have been saved over that time period, just the entire package deal, $1,000 battery replacement to get that back on the road is an absolute nothing burger. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. It's
If
a
you're,
I think it's a different equation if it's a used car and you go, oh, it needs a new battery.
yeah,
Then yes, that changes it for you.
hmm
But if it's a used car you're going to keep for a while, again, you're going to get some of that
yeah,
return. And also, in theory, that hybrid is more enjoyable to drive. It's going to be a little bit quieter. It's
yeah.
there's something in it for you, even if you do have to do that maintenance
hmm
component.
And we're talking about a car that's 20 years old and is still getting 35 miles per gallon.
Yeah,
It's absolutely still a win. And reliability wise, those hybrid systems, the ones that are mechanically less complex, the Toyota, the systems, the classic Ford system, etc., the mechanically less complex ones, generally, there's a reason that they have great durability because there's a lot less going on in them.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Honda two motor hybrid systems. They should have a very good lifetime on them. Plug-in hybrids, obviously the calculus is different because the battery is bigger. It's going to be more expensive to replace in 20 years, etc. But regular hybrids, I absolutely would not be afraid of any of them. Even the Hyundai Kia hybrids where you have to replace a belt or inspect a belt every 60,000 miles, that's a small price to pay. I wouldn't be overly concerned. And reliability is going to be substantially similar to the average six-speed automatic transmission, which has been borne out by the Consumer Reports data, etc. So
Yep.
that's what I will
That's a good
leave
spot
on.
for us
What's
to
your
end.
final word?
Oh goodness, I have a final word.
I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, reach out if you got a supercharged CRZ, especially in the Northwest. I want to drive one. That was my final word. But thank you
Oh,
for tuning
yes.
in. We are trying to get these done every week as much as we can, but if not, bear with us. We'll be back soon.
And remind everybody that they can send us their voice memos.
Yes, you can. And you can do that through hey@autobuyersguide.com. If you want to go ahead and record it on whatever device you use, and then go ahead and attach that file, that you can do that as well. We also have a phone number. Alex, have we not gotten a lot of phone calls recently?
That's probably because I don't remember the phone number and I'm recording this in Bogota. So yes, we'll put
I
it down there
know.
on the bottom of the screen for the video version and the audio version. Just send us those comments to hey@autobuyersguide.com. And remember, use the superior smartphone. Otherwise, some of us might judge you. Whatever that superior smartphone is to you.
It feels like a dig at Android users, but I couldn't understand it because
I don't know. I don't
I don't
know.
feel like it's talking about me.
I don't know. Or you could be seeing that as a dig at Apple phone users if you are seeing that you have the superior smartphone.
And isn't that the world we live in? That's a wrap, everyone.